What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another lesson on the right mindset. Today, we are going to go over the building blocks of scene structure, crafting compelling beginnings, middles, and ends to your scenes. Some of the things we will touch on is the fact that the art of scene structure is a skill that can be honed. That's right, honed. Whether you're just starting your writing journey or you're a seasoned wordsmith looking to hone your skills, understanding the fundamental elements that make up a scene is essential. So, we'll explore the importance of scene structure, the basic building blocks, and the key ingredients for crafting engaging beginnings, middles, and ends. So, remember, there's no wrong way to create a scene, but today we will go over mastering the fundamentals that will help empower you to tell your story with precision and impact. Let's do it. Hit that intro, everybody. Hey, if you haven't done so already, please hit that bell icon and the subscribe button so you don't miss out. Again, we go over lessons about the craft. We talk about reviewing and analyzing storytelling. And over the course of every season that we do a podcast, we interview other fellow writers. Let's get right into it. just if you're just jumping in, remember building blocks of a scene structure, crafting compelling middles, beginning, middles, and ends. All right, so exploring scene structure. So think of scene structure, okay, as a building block, a fundamental unit that constructs your story architecture. See, scenes are where your characters live and breathe, where the magic happens, okay? But understanding their structure is akin to having a sturdy foundation for a magnificent skyscraper. That's right. It's the skeleton that gives your narrative shape and strength, setting the stage for unforgettable storytelling moments. Just as a skyscraper's foundation must be solid, so too must your scene. So today, in this section of exploring, we're going to kind of go over the framework for your narrative and how to offer yourself a canvas to paint powerful and compelling storytelling moments. So the importance of understanding scene structure is thinking to yourself, well, why does it matter what the structure is? Thomas, I just want to tell my story. Does it really matter how I tell it? Because if I base it off a structure, am I really telling my story or am I following paint by colors? And the honest truth is, even if you're going to paint by colors, there's still a flair you can add to it. And the reason we paint by colors is so that we understand the foundation enough. And what's the rule? Well, you should learn the tools enough so you can break them. You can't break the tools and skills that you don't understand. But once you understand it, then you can play around with it. You can move around structure. But even if we talk about Pulp Fiction as a movie, there's still a structure. Even though it feels like it starts at the end and it like jumps around and it's all these like vignettes turned into one big narrative, etc., etc. He understood structure enough where he could play around with it for our mentality. So you have to look at storytelling as there is a beginning, middle, and end. There are purposes to a scene. And then through that, you can kind of manipulate it as you want. So this is why scene structure matters, because the more you understand it, the more you can play with it. Imagine playing a game without knowing the rules. It'd be chaotic and confusing. You just wouldn't be able to get through the game. But similarly, crafting scenes without understanding their core elements can lead to a narrative mess. And when you grasp the rules and principles of scene structure, you'll not be constricted. You'll be empowered. The more you understand the rules and the principles of scenes, the more you're empowered to play with them. It's like knowing the rules of a game so well that you can bend or break them strategically to create unique experiences. More importantly, with some board games, there's things known as house rules. And by understanding how the fundamental rules work for that game, you can then start adding house rules to kind of alter or change it to make, but those rules maintain the purity of the game, right? So, scene structure provides you with the guidelines you need to craft scenes that resonate with readers. And this will ensure that your storytelling remains solid even when you decide to experiment and push boundaries. Now, the freedom to create allows you that to realize this truth. There is no one size fits all approach to scene structure. So today, when we go over scene structure, this is one way of many. There are so many, just like outlining. There are so many ways to outline. I'm going to be going over one that allows you to kind of look at your scenes. Now, I use multiple variations of scene structure and stuff like that because it depends on the story I'm telling and it depends what I'm trying to go for. So, take this as the most basic version of scene structure, and that's why I chose to do my first scene structure video on this particular structure. And the thing is, every author is every author the thing is, and let me reiterate that every author is like an architect with their unique vision and style. And some meticulously outlined scenes, like a blueprint, is one way an author might approach it, while other writers might write from the seat of their pants, which we know are called pantsers or gardeners, and they discover the structure as they go. They kind of see where it goes. I like discovery writing, but there's still, you have to remember what matters most is that your choices serve your creative vision. So if you're a pantser or a plotter, if the vision is not coming out on the page, obviously that's the most important thing. And but somewhere in between, you still need to understand the fundamentals of a scene structure, and it's like a compass that helps guide you through the narrative of that scene. It and by having this skill set, it doesn't stifle creativity. It enhances it by providing a reliable framework upon which your imagination can run wild. So ultimately, you have to remember as you explore scene structure, you're not just learning the rules, you're gaining the freedom to create worlds, characters, and stories that are uniquely yours. The reality is, there has to be a beginning of a scene, there has to be a middle of a scene, there has to be an end. Fun part is the beginning could start at the end, and the way the scene works is the characters working backwards to the beginning of the moment, but the scene still has a beginning, middle, and end. You have to start a scene, you have to end a scene, and that middle, there has to be some sort of tension going on. And tension doesn't always have to be negative. It could be positive tension, right? Um, whatever like positive tension might be in a romance or just any romantic situation, right? As an arbitrary example, that romantic tension is that they want to kiss, and that tension might be underlined throughout the entire scene. And at the beginning, we set the characters up, and then ultimately their motivations, and then boom, you hit the center, they kiss, and then the scene has to resolve. Where did they go from the kiss? And that's a positive tension, positive conflict, right? The basic elements of a scene, for anyone wondering, including myself, there's an introduction to all scene elements, and that introduction is that scenes are like intricate recipes, each composed of a unique blend of ingredients. You want to understand these elements. You want to know flavors that make up your favorite dish, right? So when you're making a recipe, you're like, I need to know that pizza has cheese and sauce on it. But before we delve into the specifics, let's take a bird's eye view of these critical components that would go in a scene and how they work together in harmony to craft memorable narratives. 1, setting. Imagine the setting as the stage where your scene takes place. It's not merely a backdrop. It's a living, breathing entity that immerses your readers in your story's world. Whether it's a bustling city, a tranquil countryside, or a spaceship hurling through the cosmos, the setting provides the context for your characters' actions. A well-crafted setting not only paints vivid visuals, but also invokes emotions, creating a rich tapestry for your story. Real quick, with setting, it is a character in your story. If it doesn't feel like a character in your story, or you don't really care about the setting because you want to get right to the character work, you might want to reflect on that, because the setting is the background. It is the foundation before you start dressing it up. And the other thing is, you should think about, if a setting is, say, like, again, we use a bustling city or a tranquil countryside. That doesn't mean you're going to be outside in in front of buildings around a bustling city. But if your characters are in an office building or they're on the subway, remember the world is lived in. So your setting has to be lived in. There has to be an existence of the world around you that kind of influences the story itself. If it doesn't, then it becomes an isolated area and it doesn't feel lived in or real. And this is where world building comes in. For example, if you're doing a show about lawyers, like in Suits, there are other lawsuits. There are other lawsuits. There are other law firms. There are DA agents. There are courts. There are judges. There are prisons. There are. You see my point? Uh, there's a different world outside the Suits headquarters of Pearson Specter Lit. Okay. All right. 2, characters. Even though characters are the heart and soul of your scene, remember that settings have to have character as well. They have to be a living entity in your world. But with that said, characters, number 2, characters are indeed the heart and soul of your scene. You need at least one, right? Otherwise, you're just describing in your novel a room or a car or a train. But nothing is that, unless the car or the house have a personality. But Thomas, that doesn't make any sense. Well, if you ever seen the movie Cars, the cars have personality. If you ever watch Toys, the toys have personalities, right? So characters, these are the people who bring narrative to life. These are the characters, the personalities, motivations, the interactions, not only within the setting, but among each other. They propel the plot forward. Whether your characters are heroes, villains, or something in between, they carry the emotional weight of the scene. They should at least carry the emotional weight of the scene. It's through their eyes, words, and actions that readers connect with the story on a profound level. Their desires, conflicts, and growth from the emotional core of your scene will become the truth of their choices. And again, remember, every character needs to have a position. You need to challenge that position. And there's a consequence to that position, which creates a result. The result being that they either completely change their position, somewhat change it, or didn't change it at all, which brings us back to the beginning, their position. And as they go into the next moment, their position is challenged or not. Maybe a different position is challenged. 3, conflict. Conflict is the engine that drives the storytelling vehicle. It's the spice that adds flavor to your narrative. Without conflict, scenes would be stagnant and stories would lack tension or drama. Conflict comes in various forms. They could be internal struggles, they could be external obstacles, and they could be the clash of opposing desires. To start, it's the force that keeps readers engaged, urging them to turn the page to see how the conflicts resolve. When harnessed effectively, conflict is a potent tool for crafting scenes that linger in readers' minds. Now, keep in mind, conflict and tension doesn't have to always be negative. It can be positive, just as I did with the romance. But also, conflict doesn't always have to be anger, disappointment, regret. 2 people not liking the same football team is conflict. 2 characters wanting to go to a different restaurant is conflict. Them trying to get to a restaurant on time, but they keep running into traffic or the red light is conflict. They could still be happy, right? And they could be reacting happy to the lateness because their characters are developing. So that's positive, but they're just going to be late, which in turn may have a consequence when they get there, right? And the people that they're late getting there. Oh, you guys are 15 minutes late. What were you guys doing? And they're like, oh, it was lights. Like now there's new conflict in the new scene, right? So, and some conflict can set up future conflict. So when you're thinking conflict and you're looking at a scene, you don't have to say to yourself, what are they fighting about? It's just what is the opposing view to any positions that the characters have, or what is the opposition towards their goals. If their goal is to leave on time, what's keeping them from leaving on time? That's a conflict. If if the opposition to their goal of getting their homework done on time, but they get sick and they're fighting a cold, that is conflict. Okay. Anyway, keep in mind that these three elements, setting, characters, and conflict, are the fundamental building blocks of any scene. You can't have a complete scene without a setting, without characters, or without conflict. All right? They intertwine and cooperate to create the dynamic and immersive experience readers crave. Now, as we delve deeper into each element, which we will, you'll discover how to wield them skillfully. Now, keep in mind, I do want to say this. Setting, characters, conflict doesn't make it a finished scene. It makes it a complete scene. If there's a setting, characters, and conflict, we know that the scene is complete, but it doesn't mean it's finished. You need to add other things there. There's other elements. There has a fluidity to it. Like we're going to explain, the next thing we talk about is beginning, middle, and end, right? There has to be a beginning, there has to be a middle, there has to be an end. But these three elements of setting, characters, and conflict are the fundamental building blocks of a scene that is the minimum requirement for a scene to at least start to work. Okay? Which brings us to crafting, building, crafting beginnings, middles, and endings. Scenes, much like stories themselves, have their own unique structure consisting of distinct parts. So you want to understand these sections, as in the beginning, middles, and ends, akin to knowing how to assemble a puzzle. A great beginning, okay? A great beginning is really, you have to look at it this way. Imagine the beginning of a scene as the opening act of a play. But every time a scene starts, it's the opening act to that moment. It's your opportunity to grab your reader's attention, setting the stage for what's to come. Here, look, the art of creating a magnetic hook, or something that's captivating and engaging to your audience right from the start, has to happen in the beginning. Because a powerful beginning is not only a place where we introduce the setting, the characters, but also establish what's at stake. So remember, setting, character, and conflict, right? Or more importantly, the beginning of your scene has to establish those three elements as a foundation. Okay? Now, obviously, if we see a character, the character exists. If we see the setting exists. And if we understand the conflict, it exists. In a novel, if you don't explore the setting through the experience of the characters, neither one exists. And that's the genius of letting characters move through the environment and allowing the readers to experience that environment through the characters. That's immersive, right? So again, if a character sits on a chair and you describe the chair through the character, Jonathan walked over the shag rug of his grandmother's small apartment, placing himself down on the plastic that covered the red chair from 1930. All right, or the red chair that his grandfather used to sit in after every dinner. Okay, we're creating environment and setting. We've already established a lot with basically one or two sentences. Okay. But if you would just like, Jonathan enters the room, there's a red chair with plastic on it and a shaggy rug across the floor. That's not as powerful because that's more exposition and description. But description and exposition through characters, as we know, I say that's character exposition because we're feeling the knowledge through the emotion of the character and what they're going through. Now, a dynamic middle is also as important as a beginning. No beginning, middle, or end is more important than the other. They need to work together. So, The middle of a scene is where the narrative truly comes to life. We're already set it up with the characters, the setting, the characters, and the conflict, right? Or at least their motivations to challenge, to create the conflict and tension. So now here's your chance to kind of attack that and think of it like an act one, two, and three. The middle is second act. So we need a conflict. We need to rise to that conflict, and then we're going to have to descend to the resolution, the end of the scene, right? So think of the middle as the core of the beautiful melody filled with highs and lows, creating those tensions that will eventually lead to resolutions. And you want to maintain tension technically throughout the whole scene, even through the resolve, because you're leading to the next scene. But you don't have to make it as pronounced as the middle. The middle is where that tension happens, where it's very palpable, where you're just like, okay, I get it. But that tension needs to ensure that the plot moves forward seamlessly. And more important, you'll discover techniques to keep readers engaged as you start learning more and more and more about building that tension in the middle. Because a dynamic middle will basically, this is where character development deepens and relationships involved, and the core conflicts of the scene plays out. Because a character doesn't grow without the challenge. And since the middle is where the conflict is, you're challenging character positions. And they're either going to change completely, somewhat, or not at all. Not at all is still maintaining growth to that character. We're seeing who they are. They're steadfast. Now, obviously, if a character never grows or alters their positions, that's an issue. But that doesn't mean all positions have to change. It just means some positions have to change, because that would be growth. Now, that brings us to 3. You want a satisfying ending, because much like a beginning and a middle, the ending should also be crafted with precision and purpose. It should not just be an ending. The beginning, let's go back to the beginning, needs to set up the scene. We need to know what the setting is, the characters, and their motivations. We have to at least know what's going on. The conflict, or the middle, will challenge everything we just set up and or things we have been setting up, especially if this is a chapter 2 or chapter 3, or if this is a 4th or 5th scene within a chapter, whatever the case may be, right? But the ending not only has to close this particular scene, right? But you have to think of the closing of this scene as an act end. But it also needs to leave an impression on your audience. More importantly, there has to be a sense of closure to that scene while providing and advancing the overreaching plot. So it has to provide some plot elements, but it has to advance the plot to lead to the next thing. And some tensions can be resolved at the end of a scene, but there should still be a sense that there is more or new ones to keep going. And more importantly, a satisfying ending needs to leave your readers engaged. They need to be tantalized. And this happens through either a cliffhanger or an emotional stakes or a sense of ominousness, where it's like, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen, right? Because it doesn't have to be a cliffhanger. It just has to be where you're like, I don't have all the answers, but I have enough to keep me going. All right. Okay. Crafting a scene example. Let's do this. All right. Boop. I'm going to take this off so you can see. All right. So the scene heading is a heated argument. We're just going to make it a simple thing just so it's easy to just kind of understand. But obviously, you get more subtle with things. You get more complex with things. So what is the setting? Well, the setting, by the way, this isn't me writing the scene. This is me brainstorming the scene so I understand it. The scene is a dimly lit, cluttered living room in a small, rundown apartment. Rain pelts the windows, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and a broken vase lies on the floor, its contents scattered. So this is before we even. This is what we would in the beginning of the scene we would establish this. Okay, let's meet our characters. Sarah is a young, determined journalist with disheveled hair and a stack of research papers clutched in her hand. Mark, however, is her older brother, a laid-back musician, leaning against the wall with a guitar in hand. So right now it feels like, well, how does this setting work with these two characters in their position? Well, we'll find out. Conflict. Sarah is confronting Mark about his high night his Sarah is confronting Mark about his late night band rehearsals, which are keeping her awake, affecting her work and health. The beginning. So this is how again, this isn't me writing, this is me brainstorming. So the beginning would be Sarah bursts into the apartment, her face flushed with frustration. Mark, strumming his guitar, looks up surprised. Sarah slams her research papers on the table, causing the scattered vase to rattle. Or the shattered, sorry. She demands, Mark, we need to talk about your band practice. It's been keeping me up all night, and I can't take it anymore. So that sets the scene. Again, this is a very simple, straightforward moment, but we know what the conflict is. We've set the scene, and we established the two characters. And we already know that he's strumming his guitar. So when she says your band practice, which means we just seeded the fact that he's a musician. So it's not just Mark hanging out, leaning against the wall. He's doing something, which, by the way, keep in mind, actions speak louder than words. So if you have characters in a room, if they're doing something purposeful, not just, they're just sitting there, juggling, like that would only make sense if it made sense, like you have to give them purpose in their action. But a character sitting is probably not as exciting as a character reading a book or leaning forward, adjusting the fire, or they're sitting at a desk and they're just staring at the screen, like there's something happening, But if they're just like, Mark sat in a chair, like that. Anyway, the middle. Mark sets down his guitar, his expression defensive. Oh. He explains that the band has an upcoming gig and they need to practice. So the position is, I need to be good with my band so we can play our gig. Her position is, I need you to stop so I can't take it anymore, which is ultimately because it keeps me up all night and I want to get some sleep. So we're challenging the two positions. So one of them is going to have to change completely, slightly, or not at all. Let's see what happens. He explains that the band has an up-and-coming gig. She retorts. So she's challenging his position again, even though he was trying to defend his position to change her position. My band has a gig coming up. Well, what are the results? She says, Sarah retorts, listing the sleepless nights she's endured and the impact on her job. So now we know that her position didn't change at all, right? So Mark is like, look, I have a upcoming gig. So we're saying that Sarah doesn't care. She doesn't have compassion towards his thing that's coming up because she has her own motives. So because they did not change their positions, tension arises as they both express their frustrations, their voices growing louder. So how do we end it? Sarah, on the verge of tears, pleads with Mark to find a solution. Mark, realizing the toll it's taken on his sister, agrees to adjust their practice times. So right here, we know that Sarah actually did not change her position, but Mark did, and we see growth. And that growth comes off as compassionate. All right, I realize, I'm sorry, Sarah, I'll see what I can do about adjusting the practice times. I didn't realize how much it was affecting you. Okay? And then we give them a nice resolution. They share a quiet moment of, reconciliation, acknowledging their mutual respect and love as siblings. So another position is challenged, by the way, which is their relationship. But we see that it did not change. It stayed the same. They have mutual respect and love and admiration for each other as siblings. And then we kind of like the rain outside begins to let up, symbolizing the resolution of their conflict. So again, remember, your setting has to be a character in the story. So it's influencing the mood. It's creating symbolism and other elements. All right. So if we're going to look at the scene again, the beginning sets up the positions. Sarah is clearly upset, and she states that I need your band to stop practicing. It's keeping me up all night, and I can't take it anymore. And Mark's position is ultimately what? We learn his position when the results of the challenge is that I'm not changing my position. I have a gig coming up. Sarah doesn't change her position. She maintains her consistency and says, well, it's impacting my job, etc., etc. Mark also doesn't change his position in the middle. He realizes that no, my stuff is as important as your stuff. But by the relationship, which we established here, by the way, is once we realize that he loves his sister and he sees that she's on the verge of tears and she's pleading, Mark's position slightly changes. Doesn't change at all. It's only slightly because he agrees to adjust their practice times, not to stop his practice times. And that's an example of seeing positions being challenged. There being consequences. If you don't understand what the consequences are, Mark's practicing has the consequence of Sarah realizing that she is frustrated. So the before scene or before scenes leading up to this would probably build on that frustration, and this is the consequence that this scene is created. And she's like, you know what? I have to confront what's going on. I can't take it. So that's the consequences that they have this argument. Now, when Mark's like, hey, listen, I'm not stopping. I have a gig. And Sarah's like, but it's killing me. I need you to stop. And their positions don't change. What's the consequence? Because their positions didn't change? Tension. More tension rises. And they start getting louder. And then we have the last position challenge, which is she's on the verge of crying. He says, all right, fine. I'll adjust my practice. All right. So he slightly changed his position. And what are the consequences? They're able to resolve the situation, and Sarah feels his compassion and understanding, and then they end up making up. So there you go. Boop. Boop. Look at that. Okay. Makes sense, right? Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. All right. All right, what else do we got here? Let's see. Boop. Now, as you can see, these scenes follow the basic structure of beginning, middle, and end. It starts off with a clear conflict, Sarah confronting Mark, develops tension through dialogue and emotions. The positions that are challenged are not resolved. No one changes. They stay the same. And the consequence eventually leads to a slight change in position, which is it concludes with a resolution that leaves room for the character's growth and future plot developments. All right, that was pretty exciting. Final thoughts. Mastering scene structure takes a lot of work, and as we research, or at least as we research what the process is, you'll start learning and understanding the purpose of tools. Beginning is not just where it starts; it actually has to set up and establish certain things, so you can challenge those things to create the tension, and then the resolve is found through somebody creating a solution, and the ending, as you can see. With Mark, it was slightly adjusted, so he's going to change his practice times. So, that might lead to, does their band do well or not well, or do well or not do well at their show coming up? Does the change in Sarah's ability to sleep change her work? So those are new elements that come up. All right. So the ending has to create those opportunities for that. So even though that they resolve can you at least stop practicing a little every day or whatever? There's still more to come. There's now going to be a consequence to that change of behavior, and that should directly influence your story. But your job is to essentially grasp that scenes are a canvas upon which your storytelling is painted. Just as a skilled artist relies on the foundation of that canvas to create a work of art, understanding the fundamentals of scenes and how they begin, their middles, and endings will empower you to craft scenes that truly captivate your readers and propel your narrative forward. However, it is crucial to remember that the pursuit of a perfect scene should never hold you back. Writing is, at its core, a journey of discovery. Even as a plotter, your creativity, like a boundless river, flows without constraint. So you have to embrace the freedom to experiment, to explore new horizons, and to learn and grow as a writer. Because your unique voice and the vision you hold for your storytelling deserves to be shared with the world. Each scene you craft is a brushstroke on the canvas of your narrative, contributing to the vibrant tapestry of your story. Scene structure is a tool, not a limitation, and it's in the dynamic interplay between its elements that the magic of storytelling truly unfolds. I'm just saying. Next video. The next video in the series will focus on using sensory details to immerse readers in a scene, which engaging the senses for vivid descriptions. So we'll delve into the enchanting world of sensory details and how they can immerse your readers deeply into the heart of your scenes. The power of evocative descriptions and vivid imagery awaits your exploration. Am I right? Anyway, so stay tuned for that and keep your creativity fire burning. I have a question, by the way. What's your favorite scene from a book or movie, and what makes it memorable to you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you've watched and you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. God, I had fun. I had fun with this episode. You know what we always say, right? Let's do it. As always, keep developing the right mindsets. I'll see you next time. Bye. Love ya.